How many people believe in ghosts? Okay, now let me ask you this. Are all ghosts bad or are all ghosts okay or are some ghosts good? And you can blurt out your favorite answer. What? It's a mixed bag. Well, I'm going to tell you a story tonight about a ghost that's not evil or bad, but just a little bit different. Now, the story starts off like this. A long time ago, these two little kids, a boy and a girl, their parents bought a farm, an old farm out in the country, out in the middle of nowhere, and the farm had been empty for 20, 30 years. So they moved in, and they loved this farm. It had, are you listening, Eleanor? This is a ghost story. Are you with me? Very exciting. So they lived on this farm, and there was a big pond in the back, and there was a barn, and these kids loved their little farm life, and it was wonderful. One night, they're in bed, and they're sitting there asleep like little kids are supposed to, and they hear a strange sound. Buck, buck, buck. And they looked at each other, did you hear that? Yeah, I heard that. What was that? That was a chicken. Well, no, there's no chickens here. And they listened again. Buck, buck, buck. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's a chicken. So they got up and they ran and looked at the window, and they couldn't see a chicken anywhere, but they could hear it. And they went and they woke their mom up and said, Mom, there's a chicken outside. And she's like, no, there are no chickens here. This farmhouse is empty and there's no animals around, so going back to sleep. Well, the next day they got up and they walked downstairs, and do you know what they saw on the kitchen counter? An egg. And they said, Mom, they went and they woke up their mom, there's an egg on the counter. They went upstairs, brought Dad down. They said, Dad must have bought it at the grocery store. You know what? Dad goes, I didn't buy any eggs. Mother said, I didn't buy any eggs. And about that time they heard, buck, buck, buck. So the next day they went to school and they did all the activities that kids do during the day. The next night they come home and they're lying in bed, and guess what they heard? Welcome to the participatory part of the show. You did that really, really well. So that night, in the middle of the night, they heard, and they looked around, and she goes, did you hear that was a chicken? No, that was a chicken. So they went and they looked outside the window, and they saw it, just a shadow, just running across the yard. And that was it. So they went and they woke up their mom, and they said, Mom, there's a chicken outside. Come see it. They grabbed her and they pulled her to the window, and guess what they saw when they got to the window? Nothing. The chicken was gone. And the mother said, I don't really think it was a chicken. You probably just heard something. So the next morning they got up, they went downstairs for breakfast, and guess what was on the counter? Another egg. Dad came in, Dad said, I didn't buy an egg. Why would I buy one egg? That's crazy. Where'd that egg come from? So it was a complete mystery. So the next night, they're in bed. Sure enough, late at night, they hear, you guys are awesome. They heard chickens. One chicken. So they ran to the window, and this time they could see it in the yard. It was a chicken. It was white. It had feathers, and it's running around their yard. So they went and they run to get their mom, and they said, Mom, it's out there now. And Mom was like, that's not out there. And they're like, it's still out there. And the brother was in there. They were looking at it. So I can see it now. So Mom jumps up, runs to the window, and guess what? Chicken's gone. They go downstairs. Guess what's on the counter the next morning? Another egg. They go outside, and they can actually see chicken scratch in the grass, in the dirt, where the chicken had actually been there. So at this point, the kids are freaking out. Mom's like, okay, we got to fix this. Next door was a lady, an elderly lady who had been there. She was there way before they had moved in, and they said, we're just going to go talk to her. So they went to the next door neighbor, Mrs. Wilson. Everyone needs a Mrs. Wilson next door. And Mrs. Wilson was the obligatory nice neighbor who lived next door, and she was sweet and wonderful. And they went to her and they said, look, we need to talk to you. My children keep thinking they're hearing a chicken. But we know for a fact this farm has been abandoned and empty for 20 years. And Miss Wilson said, that's Tanner. And she goes, Tanner who? She goes, oh, you haven't heard about Tanner the chicken ghost. No, you haven't? Good, thank you. And so let me tell you the story. A number of years ago, a farm couple lived out here, a farmer and his wife, and they never had kids, and but they raised these wonderful chickens and cows, and it was a really wonderful working farm. But what happened was one day the farmer went into town on a Saturday morning. He's driving down the road, and he gets behind a giant chicken truck, and it's one of those big trucks full of chicken crates, and he sees the truck hit a bump, and suddenly, outshot from that chicken truck, one chicken. And he saw it hit on the ground, and he got excited because a chicken falling out like that, you know what that means to that night for dinner? Fried chicken. So he's like, all right. So he pulls over, and instead of a beautiful plump chicken, it's this scrawny, tiny little baby chicken, ugly as a stump. And he looks at it, and he's like, well, you're just a little baby chicken. And the chicken looked at him, and the chicken was scared. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take you home with me. So he took the chicken home to the farm. And as they're driving down the road, he's looking over, and the little chicken is scared to death and looking at him. And he kind of has a soft spot in his heart. So he reaches out, and he pets the little chicken on its head 3 times. Pat, pat, pat. And the little chicken, instead of saying buck, 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 goes peep, 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 like a baby chicken. And so he gets home and he goes to the big chicken house, and the chicken house has all these shells where he has the chickens where they gather their eggs. And he holds up the little chicken and he goes, "This is your home. And I'm going to put you here, and you can stay with these chickens, and you'll be one of us." And so he set the little chicken in a little crate by herself, and she had her own little place, and she had never had her own little nest area. And every day he would walk in and gather up the eggs, and he would always walk up to this little chicken, and he'd reach in, he'd pat her 3 times on the head, boom, boom, boom. And she'd go, "Cheep, cheep, cheep." And I think she wanted to leave an egg, but she couldn't. She was just a little chicken. But one day she started getting bigger and bigger. And so he looked at her and he goes, "You know what?" And he was really growing accustomed to this chicken. He goes, "I need to give you a name." And his mother was named Tanner. And he loved his mother so much, he said, "I am going to name you Tanner after my mother." So every day he would walk in and he'd gather up eggs from the other chicken. He'd always walk up to Tanner. He'd reach in and pet her 3 times. Pet, pet, pet on the head. But as she got bigger, she one day started saying, that was her call. And so one day, sure enough, he got in there. He goes in, and Tanner had been there for a while, and she was getting to be a bigger chicken. He reaches in, but when he reached in, he pat her on the head 3 times, and guess what? Boop! She popped out an egg. And you know what she said then? Buck, buck, buck. And it was a wonderful thing. So at that point, then Tanner started producing eggs for the chicken, or for the farmer every day like all the other chickens. Well, what happens? Time happens, and over time the farmer got elderly, his wife rather, and he grew older. The animals started dying off, and then the farm started kind of coming to a close as life goes on. And what happened was Tanner lived for a very long time, but like all the other animals, the animals died and went away. But the thing is this, and here's the lesson. If you're ever out and about, and you get a chance to actually see Tanner the chicken, if you reach in and pet her head 3 times, guess what she'll give you? Buck, buck, buck. Thank you.